Hello and welcome to the Carolina Snowflakes Podcast, where two Southerners come to terms with their liberal snowflake tendencies. We're your hosts. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Jason. And we're here with this week's episode of the Carolina Snowflakes Podcast. This one is called, Am I Homophobic?
Uh-oh.
And the short answer is yes. Yes, you are.
Me?
Yeah, whoever, anyone. Short answer is yes. Referring to me, yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be homophobic. No one wants to be homophobic, I think. But I think it's like kind of built into the culture. That's kind of the argument that I'm going to make here. Now, I also want to clarify that I can't speak for non-cisgendered straight white men. That this is who I'm referring to in this episode. I can't speak for other groups, but for straight white men, I know a bunch of them. And I happen to be one, and we're all homophobic, at least a little bit, just to different degrees.
Okay.
Every last one of us. And I have a hypothesis that extends to the rest of the population, but I have no way to confirm or deny that. You are a woman, though, so you could maybe speak to white, cisgendered, straight women.
Yeah.
Do they tend to be homophobic?
Ragingly so, yes.
Yeah, so... So I think it's a fair assumption to assume that extends out to pretty much the entire population.
Yeah.
I don't think it's wrong to guess that. And I think that it's cultural.
Yeah. Yes. We are all a little bit homophobic, racist, sexist.
Yeah, I think so. And I noticed that I had a symptom of it myself the other day. And I've been thinking a lot about it since I noticed it. And I wanted to do this episode to open up and be a little bit vulnerable myself in something I have found in myself that was homophobic, that bothered me. And so I wanted to talk about it and address it and bring it out there in the hopes that I won't be the only one. And then I won't be left being like the only lone self-admitted person who's done some homophobic shit. And that maybe somebody out there or you would also come in and say, hey, I've done a similar thing. Don't feel too bad, you crazy homophobe.
Right.
That's what I'm hoping to get from this, but I don't have a lot of hope.
Yeah.
Most people don't like admitting things bad about themselves, but I wanted to lead by example.
Okay.
So, there's a show called MTV Catfish. It's a show you and I both love. We watched the shit out of that show. It's a great show.
I've literally seen every episode.
It's been on for a really long time.
Yes.
And if you're not familiar, the premise of the show is people will get catfished on the internet, which is where someone pretends that they're someone else online and uses that to seduce you, get you into a relationship,
get your money,
get money from you, trick you in some way. Sometimes all they want is attention. Sometimes they want money. Sometimes they want both. Well, we're flipping through episodes of the show, and you've seen all of them, and I've seen most of it. And I'm looking on the Amazon Prime, and I'm flipping through the random episodes, and I'm like, well, I'll just pick random ones that I haven't seen. But they're named, the titles of the episodes are the names of the people involved. So it'll be like Cammie and Josh, Tammy and Bill. And then some of the episodes are lesbian, so it'll be like, Lauren and Kayla. And then some of the episodes are gay guys, so it'll be like Zach and Bob, And I found that in the back of my mind as I'm scrolling through, the ones that are two definitely guy names, especially if they're like definitely like normal ass guy names like Zach and Bob, I will just kind of be like, not that one, and skip to the next one. But I didn't do the same thing when it was two girl names, and I didn't do the same thing when it was definitely black names. So you would see something like Tremaine and Sparkayla, and you'd be like, those are probably African Americans, but I wouldn't tend to skip those episodes. And I wouldn't tend to skip the lesbian ones. The only episodes that my brain just by default skipped over were the ones with two guy names, especially if they were like standard ass, like Josh and, Tom.
Right.
Because my brain just rejected that. Like Josh and Tom, that's weird. But it's not. It's not. And that was my internalized homophobia. That was homophobia that's in my body and in my brain coming out in a way that I was able to notice and put my finger on. And it made me feel kind of bad, if I'm being honest. When I noticed it, I was like, I don't feel real good about that.
Yeah, it was why you wanted to do this episode, because when you realized it, you asked me, you're like, am I homophobic?
Yeah. And you were like, well, a little bit, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, a little bit.
And to me, I realized that that's true. And I also realized that it can be two things at once. It could be I'm not the target audience for specifically gay programming. But there's a difference between, we talked about this, there's a difference between programming that is for the homosexual community or gay and programming that's for everyone but has gay people in it. Mm-hmm. And Catfish is programming that's for everyone, but sometimes has gay people in it. Uh-huh. And an aversion to that is homophobia. But for me to say, like, I don't want to watch RuPaul's Drag Race, I'm not really the target audience for RuPaul's Drag Race, so there's a lot of people that don't want to watch it. Because they're not the target audience.
I mean, RuPaul's Drag Race is I think that's for gays and women.
Yeah, I think so
right?
too. And
I think so.
I think there's a difference between not being in the target audience and then being in a show that you enjoy and avoiding the gay episodes. Like, I think those are two separate issues.
I should specify gay and straight women.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I don't know if gay women watch RuPaul's Drag Race or not.
I have no idea.
I don't know enough gay women to speak to that. But let's just say the point is that, like, I don't watch Queer Eye for the straight guy, but I'm not interested in fashion, and I'm not interested in somebody's closet and what clothes they have. So, like, I'm just not the target audience for that show. It's not homophobic that I don't watch it because it's just I'm not the audience.
I suspect that even if you were gay, I don't think, just personality-wise,
it wouldn't be
you would
my
watch
kind of
that show anyway.
Exactly. So that's where my brain starts going, is like, how do I pick apart the differences? And what I realized is the reason I was upset about this Catfish one is because it is an example of what I consider to be just homophobia. It has nothing to do with not liking the show. It has nothing to do. It's only the fact that it was two names of two guys, and that by default, my brain kind of tried to reject.
Two clearly masculine names, and it's a show where the whole premise is that they have some sort of intimate, loving relationship.
Yeah, and it made me feel bad. It really did. And it made me start examining my own thoughts and beliefs. And I realized that, I have some internalized homophobia that I want to get rid of. And one of the ways I figured to get rid of it was watch those episodes. So I purposefully try to make sure I don't skip over those ones.
You purposefully watched Zach and Bob.
Yeah. And although it was, not the best episode of Catfish, and I think we could all, I think if you watched all the episodes and then the one that I'm thinking of, you would agree it wasn't really the best episode of Catfish. Mm-hmm. But I had no way of knowing that. I just judged it from the names. And so that I feel like is I don't know, it's something I wanted to admit because I wanted to put it out there because I think other people do it too. I don't think I'm the only one that has found something like that happening. And I kind of wanted to ask you some questions about it and sort of have a dialogue and see where we could get, because you're not a gay man, but you are a woman. So
what are you trying to say? That's close enough.
No, I mean, the joke there, that was a joke, the implication that was close enough. But what I really meant was that you're not in the same sort of cisgendered straight white community of men that I've grown up in my entire life.
Right.
And so it's an outsider, someone who's not in that group that I could ask. Because I could ask all my straight white dude friends, and they're all like, yeah, it's not for you, man. Don't worry about it. No one wants to watch two dudes touch dicks, really, anyway. You know what I mean? That's the answer I'm going to get from them.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So I figured I need to go outside for help in this particular scenario.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to do here today. So just to preface before I ask my first question, I wanted to say that in my life, my mind has been changed about things through dialogue and through conversation, and previously held beliefs and things that I was thought that I was immovable on have been moved by having conversation and being open and by asking questions and listening to what people have to say. And I feel like a lot of straight white men, my cohort, are really bad at that. And they're not very good at knowing, A, what questions to ask, and B, how to listen and be receptive to the answers and then maybe change their mind about something. But I think that for me, it's possible. And I hope that I could demonstrate for other straight white men that there's a way to proceed in dialogue about this where you can actually learn and find out what's right and not just defend your position. And so I think a big part of what I wanted to do here was explain that and to show a little bit of how I would think that would work. So my first question is along the lines of exactly what we've been talking about here. And it's about how do I pick apart my preference for viewing material, or, looking at what I'm reading online or what I'm listening to on a podcast from something like homophobia or racism. So if there's a program or something that I don't want to watch or listen to, how do I know if it's because of some kind of internalized bias that I have or just preference?
That's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard one. Especially because I think it's a slippery slope that could easily devolve into trying to defend, and say that it's a preference when in fact
it's a bias.
It's you're racist or you're homophobic or whatever.
So are you saying that some people use preference as a defense for their bias?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of, like, for example, dating.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you'll hear that people have never dated a person of color.
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, I just am not attracted to them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're using a preference to excuse
a bias,
a racial bias.
Yeah. And I mean, is there any way we could ever pick those two things apart, or are they kind of so intertwined you don't really know?
I think you probably can pick them apart a little bit. I guess it would have to boil down to how that thing or that person or that show episode made you feel in that moment.
Yeah, so it's like an internalized thing.
Yeah, it's very, like, you have to, I guess, have some pretty good self-awareness to even probably pick up on it yourself. Like, are you changing the channel because you actually think the show is terrible? Or are you changing the channel because you're, like, repulsed or turned off, or you just and it's because of the people that you're seeing. So
let me give an example then. If you're just a standard dude and you're sitting on the couch and you're watching monster truck racing and you're just digging it, they're jumping the monster trucks over cars and they're
while you're scratching your
crushing
balls.
Cars, you're scratching your balls, you're drinking, you're sipping your beer, and then the two winners, the first and second place, are two guys with beards, and they're really happy and they hug each other and kiss each other on the lips, and then you change the channel immediately. That would be bias, right? Because you were digging the monster trucks until it got gay.
Well, it depends. Did you change the channel because you realized that something else was on that's better than monster trucks?
Well, in this scenario, there is nothing better than monster trucks.
Nothing better. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you... then yeah, I think if you immediately changed the channel and then went and burned your favorite monster truck t-shirt because some guy kissed another guy,
right, that's
probably homophobia.
Yeah, that's bias because it's not like it was something you didn't prefer. It just you loved it until it got gay, was my point.
Yes, until it got gay. Yes.
Yeah,
you're right.
Okay, so I feel like I see that happen a lot. I feel like I've seen guys do that before, and I've even probably done it myself. Fuck, I'm just gonna be honest. But I don't like that about myself, and I certainly think it's something that I should change. I mean, but how do you do it? How do you work on changing? I
guess, it's a good comparison would be when those moments happen, if to separate preference from bias would be put a straight couple in place. Would you have had the same reaction?
Yeah,
or
right.
Put a white person in place, like whatever. Would you have had the same reaction?
Oh, that's a good...
If you're like, yes, I would because that bothers me, then maybe it's a preference.
Yeah.
But if you're like, well, no, that would be acceptable.
Yeah.
Then maybe you're like, oh.
Okay, so are you saying that if Queer Eye for the Straight Guy was just like fashion dudes talking fashion and they were all straight and they were just talking about fashion and how they could dress each other up nice, I wouldn't like that show either.
Right, and that's kind of, I said that. I was like, even if you were gay, I still don't think you would watch that show.
So that's more of a preference than a bias.
Because the content really isn't something... I know you pretty well, and I can safely say you don't generally watch a lot of, like, how-to fashion shows.
Yeah, no, I don't. Well, that's interesting. So it's a very much an individual thing. It's about how you feel about something.
You have to have really good self-awareness, and I think you have to also want to be aware. That's part of the problem, too.
Yeah. Well, so... that brings me to my next question, and this comes from, actually, I was watching an episode of Dr. Phil that was about gender pronouns and people who were non-binary and all that.
Yeah.
And the discussion was around pronouns and complicated. And the transgendered person, they kept saying, like, I understand that this is very complicated. And they put up little charts of different things and how it all works. And I kept hearing it reinforced that they understand that this is really complicated. And from this conversation we're having here, it seems like even this internalized homophobia is pretty complicated. Mm-hmm. And my question is, if it is really complicated like it seems like it is, what makes you think that people in America who have proven over and over again to be complete fucking morons would be able to grasp something that even you admit is complicated?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that one I'm still struggling with. I'm like, okay, well, if you guys know that it's complicated,
yeah,
and you know that everyone is really stupid,
if you know that collectively we're pretty dumb,
yeah, it might take a while for us to understand something complicated.
Yeah,
it's gonna take a hot minute, is my thing, and I don't like that, because that means we're going to have to suffer through this for a really long time because people are too stupid to understand something complicated. And that sucks. That's why it's like cryptocurrency. Nobody gets that either. And so, it's because it's complicated. Mm-hmm. And so we end up with people with crazy ideas that have no relationship to reality about the thing. And I don't know. I don't know what the solution to that is. I would love to talk to some advocates and see what they had to say about that. Like, is there a way that we could expedite this process?
Can we speed this up?
Yeah, because this whole it's really complicated thing, as much as I understand that that's the way that it is and it's hard, it's just not going to move people, I don't think. And I worry about that. I worry about that as somebody who wants it to be better. That the strategy of explaining these complicated things that have to do with your internal feelings, it's just not landing as much as I would want it to. And I would love to know how I could help make that happen. I mean, this is my best chances doing this podcast and trying to explain how I think we could talk better.
Well, having this conversation is definitely a good step.
Yeah, it was the best thing I could think of to do.
But I'll tell you this. So in undergrad, I had to read a book called The Social Construction of Reality. Mm-hmm. And it very nerdily breaks down how social concepts are created. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
Like, it takes generations for ideas and understandings of identities and terminology to become normal, to become everyday and just the way things are. Mm-hmm. So as much as I too would love to expedite what we know about how things are constructed socially, they take a really long time, and it takes repetitiveness of like basically beating it into your brain.
Okay. Well, I certainly believe that it's worth the fight.
No, I do too.
Yeah.
I'm just addressing the whole...
that it's going to take a while.
The speed with which change actually happens is pretty slow. I will say one kind of exception to that in recent history would be the Me Too movement. Mm-hmm. But I think that had such a huge impact as quickly as it did was because it was so vocalized and because there were so many cases and so many people talking and sharing all at once that made the attention
it was kind of like a straw camel's back thing. Like, it had been building for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like suddenly in the last 20 years, women in the workplace were, getting sexually harassed.
Yeah, it's been building for like hundreds of years.
Oh, yeah. It's just a build up. And finally, there was this momentum and a platform that affected change.
Okay.
But that happened pretty quickly. So I'll give it that.
Yeah.
It's still happening. But generally speaking, you have many, 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 many steps involved in actually changing everything from language and how we use it to laws then that address disparities, and then to just accepting what is how it is.
Okay. Well, that seems to be true, and it seems like that what you're saying is that, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like what you're saying is like, yeah, we're in it for a long haul. It's not going to be better by the time
it's part
I
of
die.
being, I mean, it's part of just being a member of society, whatever that society is. That's just part of life.
Well, I know that I would like to do my best to fight to change it as best I can while I'm here, to be on the right side of it, because I know what the right side of it is.
Yeah.
That seems obvious to me. Human beings are human beings, and they should all be treated with respect and have the same opportunities. And I've been convinced of that at least since I was 20. And, you know, I started to see the world as it is. And, you know, some of these ideas become presented to me. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, the world isn't fair, but it should be. And I think it's disheartening sometimes to see that it's going to take so long, because as a white man, I like to think, I don't know, we make change happen real fast when we want to.
Yeah,
we're in control.
That's your white man entitlement.
Yeah. So my white man entitlement, it's like, okay, well, there's this thing with homophobia and racism. We need to fix it. I'm a white man. I say we need to fix it. Why isn't it better?
Yeah. You're like, listen, I'm white guy.
Yeah, why isn't it better?
Why American white guy at that?
Yeah.
Why is this not resolved?
Yeah.
Are we not moved on yet?
Yeah, it seems obvious. I'm a white guy. I want to do it, so why isn't it done? And I can certainly feel like some of that is probably at play here. Is that there's some sort of entitlement to me of like, it seems so obvious to me, and I'm a white dude, so it should be obvious to everyone. I think there's probably some of that happening here, because I feel intensely frustrated by the fact that it's slow. It's slow going. I've been talking about gay rights.
That feeling of frustration, though, as you pointed out, is because you're an entitled white
I think
man.
so. I think
you're
so.
You're just used to things getting done your way when you want them done.
Yeah.
And you're like, listen, I'm helping.
Yeah.
This needs to be fixed now.
Yeah. And it's not being, and it's pissing me off.
Well,
part
imagine
of
the people that you're trying to help.
I know.
That have been dealing with it, that don't get to have that entitlement.
I know. I certainly can view it that way, and I try really hard to think about like, okay, what do I think a better world would look like, and how could I get us there? And I noticed that changing language seems to be a big part of the equation, and I'm just not so certain about that. And I don't know if this is fear or internalized homophobia or transphobia or what, but to me, the idea of trying to change the language seems like a non-starter. It just seems like it's not going to work. And I would give an example. So they've tried to add, you know, third and fourth gender pronouns. V is one they've tried to do. VI, it was a French thing.
Right.
And they never work. They've tried a bunch of times and it just doesn't ever catch on. And my theory about why is because language is hard to change. I've actually done some reading about language. Noam Chomsky's a really great writer who writes about linguistics. And one of the things all linguistics writers talk about is that language takes generations to change, and you can't really do it purposefully. It's almost impossible, especially to change like geographic locations. To change the names of those things is almost impossible. That's why we have cities that are named after things, the name it was before white people even got here, because it's that hard to change language. And so my question is like, knowing that from a linguistics perspective, it seems frustrating to me sometimes that the focus is so much on the language changing, because I know that that's almost impossible to do.
I disagree a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that it is possible to change the language. I do agree that it is difficult.
Yeah, it is.
But I do think that it's necessary.
Yeah.
It is necessary to come to a point where we change the language, or else we will continue to perpetuate the biases.
I think I struggle with that one, because I know that you're probably right and that it's probably true, but I also know that language is like a really particular finicky little thing that it has to do with the way that we process information and the way that we think. Language is a lot bigger than just communication. I always find it frustrating when, you know, people define the purpose of language is to communicate, because it's like, no, the purpose of language is to think. You think in your language. Computers think in their language. That's an easier way to grasp it.
You also hold biases in your language.
Yeah, you do. The biases that have been handed down in your language.
It's important to work towards changing the language.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, it's just so
hard,
though.
But I will agree that it's incredibly difficult.
It really is.
But it is possible. Here's an example. This is a pretty simple one, but pretty big deal. the changing when we were in school,
When we were young.
when we were little, we'd have to sit on the floor and the teachers would say, sit down Indian style.
Oh, yeah. They don't say that anymore.
No, but that was like what we grew up with, and it's still in our brains.
Oh, yeah.
Like if we're like sit down, we still think Indian style.
Yeah, I do.
But they don't say that anymore. They purposefully made a concerted effort
Yeah.
to change the language, and they say crisscross applesauce.
Yeah.
Or whatever now.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that that's bad. I think that's probably a good move.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
I'm just using that as an example of like it is possible to change language, and it's possible to do it to where the kids now who sit crisscross applesauce won't have that association with Native Americans.
Yeah,
every
sitting a
time
specific
they
way.
sit down.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I get you. Well, that's interesting. And that also was what we used to do when we were younger was say gay to mean bad. Like, oh, that's gay.
Yeah, unfortunately I used that term.
Well, everyone did.
I mean, it was certainly generational. We are geriatric millennials, and I can safely say that using the word gay in a like negative way to describe a thing,
or how your day went.
was so normal.
Oh yeah, it was just completely normal.
I didn't stop using that in that way probably until I was like 20.
I was
21?
way older before I stopped doing that.
Yeah.
And it was a concerted effort. It was effort that it took to do that.
For me, it took a gay friend.
Yeah.
Being like, I asked.
Now I find it
friend,
satirical.
Like, I said, hey, so when I use the word gay to negatively describe a thing, is that insulting?
Yeah.
And I mean, he was pretty nice about it. He was like, well,
yeah.
He's like, I know what you mean and we're friends, so I'm not like mad about it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty bad.
Could use a better word to do that.
Now I find it satirical. So like I can't remember, I think it was Family Guy or something, and he fell and he skinned his knee and he went, oh, gay. And I laughed not because he said gay, but because it's so inappropriate. It's so not what you would say now, but it was Family Guy. So they said it then. And the irony of that being something that you wouldn't do now struck me as funny. So it's kind of converted into a satire for me. On that, I wouldn't ever use it unless I was trying to say this is funny how the way we used to talk.
Yeah, well, I think that's also another good point. We don't use gay in that way anymore. So see, like, we can change.
We can change language. It just takes a long time. It takes
time, and it takes a lot of effort. I think probably the reason why the V or the pronouns didn't quite take off was because it was only coming from a small sect of society. Yeah. It didn't have full buy-in yet from the larger group.
Well, see, that's what also is interesting about the language thing, because different languages like English versus, say, Korean versus Chinese, gender works weird ways in different languages. And in Russian, they don't really have a word they. It's different things have to be gendered in Russian. And so it can be very, very confusing with language, because really when we're speaking, we're referring to it in English. I think you have to have completely different conversations about what you need to do in Russian. Am I right or wrong about that?
I know you're definitely right. There's a lot of languages out there that are completely structured around gender.
Yeah. So I think part of our pronoun debate needs to focus on, like, this is about English and how English works.
Yeah, because English is a completely different beast.
Yeah, I've seen some people trying to argue against the they pronouns using other languages as an example, and I don't like that argument, because you're taking the conversation to a whole nother place. We're not talking about what Russian language people need to do to fix their biases. We're talking about what English language people need to do to fix their biases. I'm not worried about what Portuguese people need to do to fix their biases. I don't know. I don't speak Portuguese, but I do speak English. And so I feel like that's a red herring. It's something that a lot of the anti-pronoun people throw out in order to distract the conversation. And when you hear somebody doing that, I just wanted to put it out there. That's a red herring. It's not the conversation that we're having. We're talking about us. And No one wants to have a conversation about what Chewbacca would say in Wookiee to be referring to non-gender binary people. That's not a conversation we're having, and it's a red herring to bring it up, is my point.
Oh yeah, Chewbacca has a term for it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And I just wanted to arm somebody out there. If you've been in this argument with somebody, I've seen this happen, and that's a total red herring, and you should call them out on it when they do it, because it's bullshit. It's something people do that's bullshit. So I wanted to throw that out there as some advice, because I've seen it and it's frustrated me. Okay, well, aside from that advice, I also would like to circle back and, kind of wind down by saying that this was an example of a conversation between two people where I was asking questions that I do believe a lot of straight white men probably have. They might not be able to externalize it. I think, as I stated earlier, people are pretty stupid, so they're not usually that good at articulating questions they have. And hell, I probably did a shitty job, but I did the best I can.
You did pretty good.
Thank you. I did the best I can to explain how you can ask these questions and have these conversations and move forward and learn something without being defensive or angry or trying to put your subjective experience of the world onto other people. And I wanted to show that as straight white men, we can do that. But you just got to put effort into it. You've got to really think. It takes real soul searching. I've been thinking about this about it for myself for days. And it was worth doing, and I'm glad I did it. It was a lot of good self-examination. And you and I have had way more conversation about this in the last few days than I think a lot of people have in years. And I think I wanted to bring that to the show, and I wanted to put it out there in the world for other people that are in the snow globe who might be like me and have some internalized biases and realize it and want to have a conversation about them. And I wanted to give an example of how that could go. And this was what I did for it. So if you're out there and you want to know, how to have these kinds of conversations, this was the best example I could give. It was my effort and my little piece. And I just wanted to put it out there. And if you're gay and you heard this and I pissed you off, I'm very sorry. That was not the intent, and I probably did fuck up, and I'm sorry. So I just wanted to also put that out there. Well, if you want to hear more episodes where I probably fuck up and say things that will piss you off, you can find them
definitely do
on our website,
carolinasnowflakes.com.
And if you want to get on Facebook and berate me in front of other people and tell me how I was wrong, you can do that on our Facebook.
Facebook.com/Carolina Snowflakes.
And if you've had an experience similar, or I got something wrong that you would like to explain to me, I really do want to learn and get better. So I would absolutely love an email.
carolinasnowflakes@gmail.com.
gmail.com.
Thanks for listening. Bye.